we'll start with this per tweet from Michael Benson. Teofimo Lopez has hinted that Eddie Reynoso could now become his new trainer. When asked about Ryan Garcia splitting from Reynoso, Teofimo said, "It might be because of some news about me and Eddie. To be continued. We'll see. My father is always going to be my main coach." And you think about that, you think about those rumors.
It'd be pretty fucking awkward having both of those guys in the same gym.
Yeah, we know that Ryan Garcia, he's down there at lightweight. He's down there at 135 pounds. And Teofimo, he's not going to be campaigning as a lightweight anymore. His next bout is supposed to take place at 140 pounds, but they are still contemporaries in the same age group, so it does create a bit of an awkward situation. I think it'd be awkward having both of those guys fighting in the same gym, but Ryan Garcia, he's made the decision he's made. He's not with Eddie anymore. For Teofimo, I think
Good fit.
Eddie Reynoso would be a good fit for his particular base style, a hard-punching, counter-punching style.
You guys remember when Canelo was coming up? He was big on counter-punching.
Oscar Valdez, before he got with Eddie Reynoso, he was a gung-ho mid-range to inside puncher, whereas these days, he is a bit of a counter-puncher. The shot he knocked out Miguel Burch out with was a counter shot. That was a counter-punch.
Teofimo Lopez, he's a counter-puncher.
If the rumors check out and Eddie Reynoso ends up working Teofimo's corner, henceforth, I think that's a good partnership. It could gel. It could be fruitful. Moreover, I view Teofimo Lopez as a more serious professional than Ryan Garcia. Young Teofimo Lopez, he's made some mistakes. He's had his drawbacks, but
Yeah, I do think he takes his boxing more seriously than Ryan.
Ryan Garcia is more focused on his brand than his actual boxing, because his actual boxing and his actual boxing career has been stifled for, what, a year now?
Yeah, we know he had some anxiety issues.
Last I checked, he got injured. He had to have some kind of a surgery. Better still, before any of that took place, Ryan Garcia didn't strike me as a guy that was taking his boxing career all that seriously, because he was in a pole position to challenge Devin Haney for his green belt.
He was.
He wasn't interested in doing that, in his own words.
He said the fight didn't excite him.
And it's not like he was doing what Teofimo Lopez was doing, fighting the kind of guys that Teofimo Lopez was fighting. Teofimo fought Richard Comey. He fought Vasily Lomachenko, whereas Ryan Garcia wanted to do a movie about himself, a biopic, based on the Luke Campbell fight.
Are you kidding me?
I shit you not. I think a partnership between Teofimo Lopez and Eddie Reynoso, stylistically, they mesh. I think they would gel together well, but Teofimo has to be willing to do what he has to do moving forward. That means his father taking less of a role in his corner.
The kid's family situation is toxic.
His father's toxic. Anybody can see he's a glory hog. Anybody can see he wants to be a star of the show more than Teofimo is, even though the guy we're all here to see is Teofimo. Moving forward, if Teofimo is to rebound off that loss to George Kambosos, that shock upset loss, and whatever psychological damage that might have caused him, coupled with what's been going on in his life outside of the ring, he's got to make the necessary changes, and one of them is less of a role, his father having less of a role in his corner, and
If he does pair up with Eddie Reynoso, there shouldn't be a power struggle.
just in general, Eddie Reynoso or someone else. I half expected Teofimo Lopez to go back to Joey Gamache, who he worked with for the Nakatani fight and the Lomachenko unification match. I half expected to hear that Teofimo was going to be working with that guy again moving forward, but whether it's Joey or it's Eddie or somebody else, there shouldn't be a power struggle between Teofimo's new trainer and his father.
140's a dangerous enough place as it is.
Leave your family issues at the door, because there's work needs doing, and 140, that's not a safe place. You won't find very many featherweights that moved up in weight up there.
Up there at 140 you won't.
Speaking of Ryan Garcia, previously mentioned, Ryan Garcia splits from Team Canelo because he wanted independence, own gym, and to better build brand.
Time will tell if this was shrewd business or bad business.
Ryan decided that it was time for him to have his own gym where he's not confined to a certain schedule and a certain day. It's like, hey, we have a fight coming up, you know. He wanted to build his own brand and make it bigger, said Garcia. I think it's time. It's like when you have an apartment, you get tired of renting and you want your own place. It's almost like that. The main thing is that Ryan did not want to feel that he was, in somebody else's, he felt that his brand can hold up. Just like Floyd Mayweather Jr. when Mayweather decided to move away from Top Rank and start doing his own thing. It's almost the same thing. He just didn't want to feel confined to one area where you have to wait until they decide to work out and this and that. We don't want that.
Let me tell you something. Floyd Mayweather was a lot further along in his career than you are when he broke away from Top Rank.
Seriously, what's with all these fucking guys thinking they're the next Mayweather?
You're not.
Ryan is becoming a strong man and making his own decisions. That's the bottom line. And we have to respect that. He's not a kid anymore. He wants to make his own decisions, and it's not a bad decision. We're still in contact with everybody at Team Canelo. On February 5th, Henry posted an Instagram video of Ryan working mitts with his son Sean at Alvarez's and Reynoso's headquarters.
This guy hasn't even won a title yet. He wants to focus on his brand.
He's going to be training with Joe Goossen, that much we know. Goossen and Garcia have a history together dating back to Garcia's 15th and final national title victory in Reno, Nevada, before turning professional in 2016. Joe and I were working with Ryan at the time, said Henry. After the Nationals, we wanted to work something out, and it didn't work out as planned. It didn't pan out like we thought it would, so we decided to go in a different direction. It's a learning curve on what's best. Destiny just brought us back. Joe is a very good coach. We respect him. That's the way we wanted to go. Goossen has been based in the San Fernando Valley in California for decades, running the 10 Goose Boxing Gym in Van Nuys. He will now have to travel to train Garcia. We're doing good sparring. We're not missing a beat. We can't. We have a fight coming up. We will be ready come April 9th, said Henry.
Sounds to me like a comfortability issue.
Iron sharpens iron, that's what they say. You got world champions like Oscar Valdez in the Eddie Reynoso boxing gym. Guys like Canelo Alvarez.
Ryan wants a more tailored approach.
A more personal approach. So he finds himself working with Joe Goossen again. And
you could almost interpret that as him being a prima donna.
A peacock, him wanting that more personal approach. You got a former unified heavyweight champion at the Eddie Reynoso gym, a current 2-division champion, a current 4-division champion at the Eddie Reynoso gym, and what you want is a more personal approach. Being in the company of these athletes, these fighters, these champions, that's not enough for you. You need more attention than that.
Do you remember when Ryan was talking about his anxiety issues?
We talked about it here on the channel and how Ryan Garcia stated he walked into the gym one day, the Eddie Reynoso gym, and he bursted out in tears. He bursted out crying. I wonder how those tears were received by his stablemates, his then stablemates at the Eddie Reynoso gym, because I don't imagine at the Eddie Reynoso gym there's all that much room for softness, weakness, crying.
Hey, don't confuse that with me judging him. I'm just wondering, how did Eddie Reynoso receive that stuff?
And the other guys that were there, his stablemates, Canelo Alvarez, what was their reaction? Underneath it all, what were their thoughts on Ryan Garcia going in there and bawling his eyes out for no reason at all, inexplicably?
I'm just wondering.
I'm just wondering if that don't got something to do with him wanting to change his decorum. He says he wants to build his own brand. You see this a lot in today's day and age. Not exclusive to boxing. A lot of young entrepreneurs that are more focused on building their brand than the actual quality of their product, because Ryan Garcia's boxing career is being stifled by Ryan Garcia and his constant issues outside of the ring. Your brand is associated with your boxing.
I see this a lot.
Enterprising young individuals who claim to be business-minded, focusing more on their brand than their actual product, what it is they're marketing, what it is they're selling. It's a common pitfall I see all the time these days, not exclusive to the sport of boxing, to where they're more focused on the wrapping paper, the bells and the whistles, than what's actually in the box.
Get yourself a web designer.
Somebody to cook you up a nifty little logo, maybe a jingle, maybe a theme song, all that jazz.
Yeah.
I see this a lot, and I often think to myself, when I see this, that perhaps that time would be better spent focusing on the actual product, the meat and potatoes, as it were, as opposed to what knives and forks you serve those meat and potatoes with. When it comes to Ryan, he talks about focusing on his brand. While he's a pugilist, he's still a pugilist. While he's a boxer, and his actual boxing career has been stifled. It has slowed.
He hasn't fought in something like a year.
I think that's affecting his brand more than anything else, more than actual branding, having his own gym and starting up his own team with its own flavor.
Time will tell if this is a wise decision.
Ryan Garcia mentioned Floyd Mayweather Jr. breaking away from Top Rank as a parallel of sorts for what he's doing here with the Eddie Reynoso gym. But I reiterate, Floyd Mayweather was a lot, and I mean a lot further along in his career than Ryan Garcia is here today. Floyd was a lot further along in his career when he broke away from Top Rank than Ryan Garcia is here today, breaking away from the Eddie Reynoso gym. Ultimately, it's his prerogative, it's his decision, but it does sound to me, does sound a lot like this is about comfortability.
You think something at the Reynoso gym made him uncomfortable?
Maybe. It seems to me like the difference between working out at home and working out in a gym setting.
What's going on here with Ryan?
Seems like one of those things. Time will tell if he's making the right decision, but it sounds a lot like what he's saying is he doesn't want to be under anybody's banner, under anybody's thumb. And sometimes that kind of regimented discipline is required before you can move on to the next phase of your career. You first need that regimented lifestyle.
Regimented schedule.
You hear it all the time. Before you can lead, sometimes you have to follow. You gotta crawl before you walk, that's what they say.
Ryan's saying that he's ready to run.
Well, lambast him for that. He knows his own mind better than I do. The most I can say is that Ryan hasn't competed at the highest levels of his own division, let alone the highest levels of the sport yet. He's not even there yet in his career to where he needs to start focusing on his brand. I mean, it doesn't normally happen that way.
These are all things that build in time, gradually.
He's saying that he's ready to go his own way and do his own thing. For me, seems a bit early for a guy who hasn't fought for a full-fledged world title just yet. A guy who's been on hiatus for whatever reason. He's been on hiatus the last 12 months. He hasn't fought.
And we'll see if getting with Joe is good for him.
We'll see if Joe Goosen being in Ryan Garcia's corner gives us a better Ryan Garcia, more focused, more determined Ryan Garcia than if Eddie Reynoso were in his corner. Ultimately, it's a story that only time can tell.
It can be either way, but the money, you need to be superior, much more than to fight Canelo.
It has to be more than fighting Canelo.
That's correct.
Okay, so there was a rumored offer from Eddie Hearn to Jamal Charlo to face Andrade once upon a time for an unified fight at $7 million. Does that sound right to you?
You need to be much more than that.
More than $7 million to fight Andrade?
Yes, because it's not an easy fight. He's a great fighter. That whoever he wants to put that fight, that most likely is not so attractive. That one need to be for the money.
I hope you guys were listening. I hope you were paying attention. Samson Lewkowicz is getting in the way of Benavidez versus Andrade in all the ways I told you, not but a few days ago. He'd get in the way of that fight because unbeknownst to most, the reason Canelo Alvarez beat David Benavidez to the punch, the reason Canelo got to Caleb before David is because of this man here, Samson Lewkowicz. He wanted to wait. I happen to think that David wouldn't have blown the weight ahead of the Romer and Gulo fight if you would have swapped Romer out for Caleb Plant. I happen to think if the fight were a unification match, David would have been...
If it would have been Caleb he was fighting, he would have been more focused.
I'm not making excuses for David Benavidez, by the way. Blowing the weight is his own fault, him and his teams. But if you ask me, hypothetically speaking, if it were Caleb he were fighting instead of a pointless Romer and Gulo fight, I think David would have been up for it enough that he wouldn't have blown the weight. As it stands, this is the man that handles his career. This is the guy that makes all the decisions despite what David says to the media. David himself expressed an interest in facing Demetrius Andrade, but that interest can't materialize based on what Samson is saying. How could you want more money for Demetrius Andrade than Canelo Alvarez? He knows financially that don't make sense to nobody.
The Boxing Voice conducted this interview.
And Nesta Gibbs of the Boxing Voice asked him outright, would $7 million be enough to do the fight? And you heard what Samson Lewkowicz said. They want in excess of that. What they want is close to $10 million or $10 million for a Demetrius Andrade fight. And for a perspective, $10 million.
Huh?
Caleb Plant got $10 million up front for Canelo.
You want more than $7 million for a Demetrius Andrade fight?
You know, given that Jamal Charlo, he don't want no parts of Demetrius. Neither does David Benavidez. I'd say that
What the fuck?
Demetrius Andrade has more of a stake, more of a claim to being some kind of a boogeyman than those guys do. David Benavidez himself said he's open to facing Demetrius Andrade. But I told you before, and I'll leave the link to that video in the description box. It's not his decision to make.
It won't happen.
Do you see now why I didn't waste any of my own time breaking down that fight? It's because I figured that fight won't materialize. That fight don't happen. It don't fucking matter what David Benavidez is telling the media, because David Benavidez was telling the media that he wanted to fight Caleb Plant, and for what it's worth, I believe him. But his own promoter, his own people, they're going to get in the way.
Samson got in the way of that fight, and now he's getting in the way of this one.
Listen, this business works a certain way whether you like it or not. I don't want to marginalize the fighters and belittle their contributions to the sport, but the truth is the market value of a Benavidez versus Demetrius Andrade fight, it ain't $10 million or $15 million. I mean, if you went as far as spending $10 million just to get David Benavidez in the ring, David Benavidez that ain't even got no belt, if you went as far as giving him that, what would you have to give Demetrius Andrade?
What's he gonna want for the fight?
I'm telling you right now, that's not a $15 million fight.
You set an asking price like that, it's because you know you're not gonna get it.
You know nobody's going to give it to you, though. At the same time, you also know that's not what your fight is making. It's nowhere near.
You don't make that kind of money, so what the hell are you doing?
There's no way you can justify this. There just isn't. I mean, even if you believe, like I believe, that David actually wants these fights underneath it all, that he wants these fights, but somebody on his side of things is screwing the pooch. We know who. It's Samson. Even if you believe, like I believe, that David would be willing to take on Demetrius, at the end of the day, it's Samson that's screwing the pooch, and Samson is David's guy. Thus, the blame for this has to be rested at the feet of Team Benavidez.
You heard what he said. It's a risky fight. The Andrade fight.
Was more or less his closing statement in his attempt to justify his asking price for his fighter in excess, well in excess of...
David's got to get away from these people, man.
He's ruining his career. That's what Samson Lewkowicz is doing. He's putting a cap on his potential based on his own personal preferences and personal interests. You could give David decent odds to maybe beat Demetrius Andrade, but at minimum, he'd likely make a career-high purse boxing him that he's not making over there on the PBC side of things, because what do you think they're paying him to fight guys like Ronald Ellis and Tyrone Davis? What do you think he stands to make boxing David Lemieux if and when that fight happens? You think he's making $3, $4, $5 million?
Or is it just me being biased?
This is just Ring IQ spinning things again, his narrative. Did you hear what the guy said?
Because the average boxing fan these days is a fucking mongoloid.
That's why I have to repeat myself so much. I don't actually know what the future holds for David, because right now there are rumors and rumblings of a potential Charlo versus Caleb Plant fight. So those are two guys that he won't get to fight, and they're on the same side of the street as him.
He doesn't appear to be in the running for a Canelo Alvarez fight.
His own guy, Samson Lewkowicz, in so many words, took him out of the running for a Demetrius Andrade fight. So beyond David Lemieux, where does that leave him? Because he can't make super middleweight forever.